It is important for a Bitcoin treasury company is to have some kind of a business in the Bitcoin economy. For example, we are looking at Bitcoin learning as a solution. Being an educationist, being in education for the last 40 odd years, we are looking at Bitcoin courses to unfold. It's when we became the first publicly listed company to adopt the Bitcoin standard on our balance sheet.
How do you think about how India will evolve with the Reserve Bank of India and SEBI? How can they adapt to this new form of asset and treasury?
There is a very good parallel that you can form with gold. Indian household hold more than 28,000 tons of gold. Once you realize the properties of Bitcoin are very similar to gold, a lot of the young generation start to use Bitcoin as some kind of collateral in the future.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. Today we have a very special guest. We have Siddharth Barwani, who's a CFO and Managing Director of Jetking. So welcome, Siddharth.
Thank you, Kingsley. Thank you for having me.
So today we'll be talking about Bitcoin treasury companies and especially Jetking. So Jetking is a multi-generational business. It's been around for 80 years. Maybe tell us, Sid, about the origins of Jetking and when you decided to adopt Bitcoin as a treasury asset.
So Jetking is almost in its third phase now. So it was started by my grandfather, and he started with war surplus goods first and radio manufacturing. There used to be these beautiful radio small kits where you could assemble everything together, and sold maybe more than 20 million at that stage back in the 70s. Then the business pivoted into an IT training company. At its peak, we were training about 60,000 students a year, and we had about 200 centers across India. Exposure to Bitcoin happened in my personal capacity. I was a fan of peer-to-peer networks, and having downloaded, my first hustle in school was to download music off the web, burn it on a CD and sell it in school. And I was making a lot of money, and I understood the power of peer-to-peer networks then. That made me get into Bitcoin, and Bitcoin came into Jetking in 2017. So we had a chance to buy about 220 Bitcoin from this company based in Singapore, had an office in Bangalore, who just wanted to offload their Bitcoin. And we went to our board of directors and the management at that stage, which is my elders, which is my dad and my uncle. And they said, you guys have lost the plot. Bitcoin cannot exist on a balance sheet in a publicly listed company. 6 months later, RBI in India banned it, and we said it's fine. Now that the story in India slowed down, let's just keep it in our timeline. In 2020, when Sailor came across and took this asset on its balance sheet, we just sat back and said at that stage that this is something interesting. And in 2022, we went ahead and became the first publicly listed company to buy virtual digital assets, including Bitcoin. At that stage, we also bought Ethereum to bring in a more holistic approach. And at that time, the board of directors also were slightly risk averse. So we went ahead and bought these two assets. And then later on in 2024 is when we became the first publicly listed company to adopt the Bitcoin standard on our balance sheet, to say that 15% of the business cash would be kept in cash. Balance would be all parked in Bitcoin, and the rest is unfolding as we go.
Incredible. Great to hear about the history of Jetking, and 2017 when you pitched the idea to Jetking, and now you the first mover of Bitcoin treasuries in India. Now, I can understand in India it hasn't been the first mover with regards to regulation. How do you think about how India will evolve? With the Reserve Bank of India and SEBI, how can they adapt to this new form of asset and treasury?
Sure. So crypto as a industry, India is the number one user of crypto as an industry, right? Having been such a large economy and a large country, what is very important is to establish a very firm regulatory process in the country, right? In the last 5 years, since the ban was uplifted by the Supreme Court of India, in the last 5 years, there's been multiple other high courts and lower courts who have come out and said that Bitcoin or any other crypto or virtual digital assets is okay to hold. It can either be property, it can be intangible assets, but you can do business. All of the regulators have come out and said that there needs to be a larger, wider regulation across, maybe at the parliament level. I personally feel in the next 6 to 9 months, there will be a lot more clarity in terms of how these assets are supposed to be treated. And all of the regulators, including SEBI, RBI, Ministry of Finance, all of them will come out with a blanket regulatory framework which will allow you to then do business. If you see a lot of the Web3 businesses that have happened in India, still have a lot of their back offices still based. There might be founders based in Dubai, Singapore, or anywhere else, but a lot of the offices are still based in India. And to say that the technology has been consumed very aggressively, and having been an IT first country, I feel like the technology around blockchain will also be consumed very rapidly. So I think it's just a matter of time. Over the last 3 months, there's been the best of the best politicians have come out and spoken about CBDCs, for example. So what it goes to say that it will eventually open up a lot of regulatory clarity for how people can do business in India around Bitcoin or virtual digital assets.
That's great. Yeah. So regulation, it's going to have more clarity very soon.
100%.
And so for India as an opportunity, maybe tell us about how you see the opportunity in India to have digital assets like Bitcoin.
I don't know about any other cryptos. I'm 100% Bitcoin only, and our company will always remain Bitcoin only as well. And I personally feel that there is a very good parallel that you can form with gold. So Indian household hold more than 28,000 tons of gold. Once you realize the scarcity around Bitcoin, once you realize the properties of Bitcoin are very similar to gold, a lot of the young generation will start to save in Bitcoin, start to hold in Bitcoin, and start to use Bitcoin as some kind of collateral in the future. The way we've seen it unfolding, the way every cycle, every 4-year cycle that Bitcoin goes, there's about 20-30% more Indians who come onto the whole crypto framework. The problem I personally feel is that people get distracted with a lot of the other coins that are there. When we kind of started looking at digital assets, there was about, if I'm not mistaken, about 15 to 20,000 tokens at that stage. Today there's a million plus, right? So what I personally feel is that people need to understand Bitcoin, the technology, and why Bitcoin first before getting into any of the whole crypto frenzy that unfolds, generally speaking. But once you understand the correlation between how gold and Bitcoin is, I personally feel that there is a lot of savings that will happen in Bitcoin in India.
Yeah. So Bitcoin is gold 2.0. Exactly. Or digital gold.
Exactly.
So maybe tell us a bit more about being a public company. So Jetking is a public company. Traded on the Bombay Stock Exchange. Maybe tell us about what it's like running a public company.
So from the outside, it feels it's super simple, right? But what happens is I generally say this a lot, that I was born into a publicly listed company. So that made me realize that when you're taking risk, your risks are way more calculated than maybe in a privately held company. More specifically, India, we used to be National Stock Exchange listed and Bombay Stock Exchange listed. Then at some stage we delisted from National Stock Exchange, and now we're only Bombay Stock Exchange listed. So what it really does, it sanitizes your thought process towards risk taking, for example, and what you do from the inside is way more calculative and way more planned than just taking over a business and then starting a Bitcoin treasury company, for example. So running a listed company has its own merits and demerits. The speed is slightly slower. But when you do execute it, the capital markets, when they open up to you, it becomes a lot more larger than a privately listed company. So
amazing. And so maybe final question on DAT companies. What do you think about the emergence of digital asset treasury companies, and how do you see them evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I personally feel this is about distribution, right? So Bitcoin has 3 or 4 ways that you can hold Bitcoin. So one is literally holding Bitcoin directly in your wallets. The second is possibly accessing to an ETF, and the third is holding an equity of a Bitcoin treasury company. I personally feel there's about 210 roughly Bitcoin treasury companies across the world. I think in the next 5 years, there'll be north of 20,000 across, and it'll be available in most capital markets. What is important for a Bitcoin treasury company is to have some kind of a business in the Bitcoin economy. For example, we are looking at Bitcoin learning as a solution. Being an educationist, being in education for the last 40 odd years, we are looking at Bitcoin courses to unfold. So only holding Bitcoin is one part of it, but building value on top of it would become super important. I think That is A. B is working very closely with the regulators, because tomorrow, if any regulators have any issues that they don't understand about Bitcoin, it's very important to clarify how this works. Because blockchain is permissionless, as inherently permissionless, a lot of regulators might be spooked about what is going on. So what is important is for a Bitcoin treasury company, or even for us at Jetking, is working very, very closely with a lot of the regulators and making sure that they understand what we are doing. So building a Bitcoin economy and working very closely with regulators becomes like the top 3 priorities for us.
Love it. Well, congrats with Jetking. Very excited for this journey, and we're very much looking forward to seeing the future of Jetking.
Thank you, Kingsley. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much, guys. That was Siddharth Barwani, CFO and Managing Director of Jetking. It's a company founded 80 years ago and the first digital asset treasury company in India. And we're very excited to hear more from Jetking.